BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, this is Seriously from BBC Radio 4. I'm Gabriel Gatehouse with a series about the most powerful man you've never heard of. Here's episode 4 of The Puppet Master.
Behind every political decision and every political project could be found Surkov.
A brilliant tactician with keen survival skills.
He wrote music, played chess. He had connections everywhere.
We're on the trail of Vladislav Surkov, the Grey Cardinal of the Kremlin, a.k.a. Mr. Black Square. On a cold November night in 2010, journalist Oleg Kashin was walking home after popping out for some cigarettes. As he approached his block of flats, he noticed two men loitering. One was holding a bunch of flowers. Hidden inside was an iron bar.
I was brutally attacked in front of my home in Moscow. I had about 56 strikes of iron stick by my head. I lose a finger because the...
You lost a finger?
One finger.
Oh, yeah, I see it. It's gone. A little finger on your left hand.
I nearly died. It was very mysterious and surprisingly that I was alive.
When he recovered, he started trying to figure out who might want him dead.
I was trying to find the main conflict between me and some terrible group or gang.
Kashin had enemies. His journalism was biting. Much of his recent work had been on youth groups, the profusion of movements whose purpose was to control the streets in the event of anti-government demonstrations. And behind those movements stood Vladislav Surkov, the man at the centre of our series.
They were burning books on the streets of Moscow. They were chasing the political activists, beating them.
Ilya Ponomaryov. He was the opposition MP who had a sort of love-hate relationship with Surkov.
They were organizing these 5 minutes of hate, on their youth camps.
And what was Surkov's involvement in that?
He was the architect. He was the creator of this.
OK, back to Oleg Kashin, the journalist who was attacked.
All my conflicts were about pro-Putin political youth movements.
Youth groups,
yeah.
Nearly 5 years after the attack, police arrested the man with the bouquet of flowers. He was a mixed martial arts fighter by the name of Danila Veselov, and he and several others were later convicted. But as is often the way in Russia, those who'd ordered the attack were never brought to justice. Kashin continued his own investigation, and eventually he got hold of this.
Так, 24 июня 2015 года.
It's a video of the police interrogation. In it, the attacker says that about a week before the assault, he met two men in an Uzbek restaurant in Moscow. The instructions were basically to injure him, the attacker says, preferably in his hands so he wouldn't write all kinds of libel. And then the investigator asks, who says that? And the attacker answers, Turchak. Now, Andrei Turchak was a former head of the youth wing of United Russia. That's one of the groups that Surkov controlled, and he was a rising star in the party that Surkov helped create. Oleg Kashin believes that the attack was probably personal, not political. He'd recently published an insulting blog post about Turchak, and for his part, Mr. Turchak denies and has never been charged with any involvement. But the question is this. Were Surkov's youth groups running amok?
It was a very dangerous game. I personally told him several times that you are creating a monster that you would not be able to control. And then we saw murders, we saw fights between FA and anti-FA, street fighters. It was all the result of Kremlin's activities in mid-2000s.
It's around this time that Russian politics starts getting a little bit weird. That's Vladimir Putin tickling the ivories there, picking out the notes to a Fats Domino number at a charity gala in St. Petersburg in 2010. He sounds a little uncertain at first, but then the band strikes up and he takes the microphone. audience is full of film stars. Goldie Hawn claps her hands in time to the music. Sharon Stone snaps her fingers. Putin looks deeply uncomfortable.
The moon stood still on Blueberry Hill.
Was this a rebranding? What happened to the ex-KGB hardman? And Vladislav Surkov, the image maker, the PR guru, what was he thinking? The answer is this. At this point, Surkov wasn't working for Putin. Here's what happened. In 2008, Putin was coming to the end of his second term as president. The constitution barred a third consecutive term, but Putin didn't want to quit. So he and his prime minister, Dmitry Medvedev, came up with a clever trick. Let's swap jobs. There'd be the small matter of a couple of elections to win, but by now Surkov's system of political control was so refined that pretty much took care of itself. So, Medvedev became president and Putin his prime minister. But Surkov stayed put. He was still working for the president. So this Kremlin shuffle left Surkov with a new boss, Medvedev. And what's the one thing that everyone says about Surkov?
Сурков был совершенно очевидно.
Surkov was always utterly loyal to whomever was in charge.
Gleb Pavlovsky worked with him in the Kremlin for more than a decade.
Он всегда знал своего руководителя.
He always knew who the boss was, and the boss could always be sure there would be no intrigues against him.
Right. Fast forward to 2011. Now, Medvedev is approaching the end of his term, and the big question is this. Will he and Putin reverse the Kremlin shuffle? The hardliners want Putin back in the top job, but the Kremlin isn't a monolith, and the liberals want Medvedev to stay. And Mr. Black Square? Which side is he on?
Сурков всегда был крайним.
Surkov was always a proponent of harsh measures, police measures, in relation to demonstrators. That was his position for as long as I knew him.
Okay, so that's hardline Surkov, the Surkov who worships the god power. But here's another side to him.
I walked on the banks of the tin can banana dock.
The Surkov who likes to recite beat poetry and loves Western culture. Remember Olga Krishtanovskaya, the researcher who knew Surkov back in Soviet days? Well, they met again, many years later, in his office in the Kremlin.
Он мне сказал такую вещь, которую я очень запомнила как-то.
He said something to me which I will always remember. I'm not against democracy. If you knew what a liberal I am, you'd be amazed. I might be the biggest liberal in the country.
Confused? Maybe that's what Surkov wants. So, at the start of 2011, Russia stood at a crossroads. Down one path lay liberalization, down the other, authoritarianism. And the man whose job it was to control everything was working overtime. People were seeing the hand of Surkov everywhere. There's an extraordinary bit of tape that illustrates this. A news crew is visiting the offices of an election monitoring organization. Now, you don't really need to speak Russian to get that. You are Surkov propaganda. You are Surkov propaganda. You are Surkov propaganda, over and over again. That's all they say, because all of TV was tainted, and anything that Surkov touched was potentially infiltrated, subverted, faked. But the show must go on. Parliamentary elections were looming. Here's how they would go. United Russia, Putin's party, would win, naturally. But the process had to at least resemble a contest. Surkov needed a tame opposition party for the liberal, urban middle class. So he approached a young oligarch called Mikhail Prokhorov. He offered him the leadership of an existing party, on condition that he played the game, of course. Prokhorov accepted, but secretly he had other ideas, and he told them to his deputy, Yevgeny Roizman.
Он говорит, понимаешь, эту стену не пробить.
He says to me, look, you can't beat the system. You can't break down that wall. Our task is very simple. Make a deal, get through the door, and then smoothly change direction.
Roisman had a reputation as a genuine opposition figure, and so with him on board, a party that had looked at first like just more Surkov propaganda started gaining real support.
Партия начала быстро раскручиваться, Сурков испугался.
The party quickly gained traction, and Surkov got scared. I predicted this would happen. I said to Prokhorov, at some point they'll call you into the Kremlin and tell you to get rid of me.
And that's exactly what happened. Surkov told the oligarch to fire his deputy, but the oligarch refused, and then, at a party gathering, in front of the cameras, he went off script.
Now I'm going to say something which I think many people already know, but for some reason they never talk about. There is a puppet master in this country who long ago privatized the political system, who misleads the leadership of this country about what's really going on in politics, puts pressure on the media, installs cronies, and tries to manipulate citizens and their opinions. His name is Vladislav Yurievich Surkov.
A puppet had broken free, gone rogue. Surkov quashed the rebellion. Prokhorov was out. But the curtain had been lifted. Events were moving quickly now. In September, at a football stadium in Moscow, President Medvedev made the announcement that everyone had been waiting for.
Я считаю, что было бы правильно, чтобы съезд поддержал кандидатуру председателя партии Владимира Путина на должность президента страны.
The Kremlin shuffle would be reversed. Putin would run for the presidency, and the hardliners were coming back. But it wasn't over yet. In December, in the parliamentary election, Putin's party did badly. To secure a majority in the Duma, they rigged the results. People were furious. Despite the winter cold, the crowds just grew and grew. Russia without Putin, they chanted. Tens of thousands of them. They were the biggest street protests since the fall of the Soviet Union. Ilya Ponomarev remembers.
It was clear that people actually are ready to seriously rebel.
We're talking about an overthrow of the regime.
Yeah, I think that we could have achieved this at that moment.
As the demonstrations continued, Sergei Dorenko, an influential radio host, got a call. He was summoned to a meeting, along with a couple of dozen other influential media types. Some of them were Surkov's personal friends.
Surkov explained, you saw this situation. Please do not destroy the country. Please, if you have some opportunity to speak to public, to people around you in media, please be calm. This is my personal request.
So he wasn't giving orders, he was asking.
He was asking with very, very extremely worried face.
Surkov says please? The liberals were emboldened. The puppets were talking back.
The people who stood in this room, they said, yes, it's dangerous, probably, but it's dangerous for the system, it's dangerous for everybody of us, it's dangerous for the capital, Moscow, probably is dangerous, but you guys did it.
It's your fault, they told him. This was about more than vote rigging. At stake was Russia's future direction, liberalism or authoritarianism. But Surkov was still trying to play all sides.
From one side was the system that he was creating, and that was opposing the protests. From the other side, there were a lot of people whom he sympathized, and creative class was on Bolotnaya, and he himself took himself as a part of the creative class.
As the protesters' numbers swelled, Surkov met with Ilya Ponomarev. Remember, he was the opposition MP who'd vowed never to take Surkov's money, but ended up working with him on a government tech project. So many saw him as Surkov's man.
I called him and met him the same day and said, so I think that something started. And he said that, yeah, I see what's happening. And I think that your future is right now on the street of Moscow. I waive all the obligations that you have. You should go there, and you should be with the people.
So Ponomaryov joined the protesters with Surkov's blessing. Why? Was it all part of the performance? Because the puppet master still had other strings to pull. All those youth groups, they'd been created for precisely this, to take back the streets against a popular uprising. Now was their moment. Oleg Kashin, the journalist who was nearly beaten to death, was watching closely.
A lot of young people are in Moscow, and they're waiting for order to go to the street to fight. I was waiting for them, and everybody waited for them.
But here's the strange thing. The order never came. All those young guys, bussed in from the provinces, they never appeared. Had Surkov picked a side? Was he tacitly backing the liberals, the artists, his creative class? I genuinely don't know. But in the corridors of Putin's court, some suspected, yes. His former Kremlin colleague, Andrei Kolyadin, remembers a whiff of treachery in the air.
People denounced him, saying he was trying to persuade Medvedev to run for a second term, to break his obligations to Putin. I think they were lies. Surkov is an extremely experienced politician. He understood the dangers of such a position, the position of a traitor who doesn't stick to the bargain, a total end to his career. These days, you wouldn't get killed, thank God, but sometimes a political death is scarier than real death, because one day you're all-powerful, and now you're outside the system. You can lose everything.
Next time, a fight for survival. And a message from the puppet master. Don't stop now. You can get the final part if you search for Seriously in the BBC Sounds app. I'm Gabriel Gatehouse, and the producer was Neil Rozelle, and it was mixed by Tom Brignall.
You know the way late at night, in bed, in the dark, your tired mind can wander and strange thoughts float like balloons escaping into the sky. Well, Bunk Bed is a podcast where Peter Curran and Patrick Marber find the nearest faraway place from the hurly-burly of daily life, where tired minds can wander. Why don't you come along and eavesdrop and see if you like it? You can subscribe to Bunk Bed on BBC Sounds.